Welcome to Leominster Access Television and Neighborhood Snapshot. My name is Bob Saudelli. I am a member of the Leominster Historical Commission. Today, our fascinating guest, and she really is, she's an amazing lady, is Mrs. Helen Beliveau, who was born in 1916. She has recently celebrated her 88th birthday. We wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you.
And she grew up in the Pinehurst neighborhood section of Leominster, which was an area, a neighborhood. It's not indicated by one of the neighborhood signs, but it was a separate neighborhood, and we're going to learn a lot about that very, very interesting neighborhood today. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you.
Welcome to LATV and to Neighborhood Snapshot. First of all, I have to clear something up. In prepping for this interview, I was certain that the Pinehurst section of Leominster was beyond the flats, and which is true, and I was sure that it had some connection to the former Castle Arms restaurant, which is no longer the Castle Arms. I thought it probably was the Pinehurst restaurant before that. You have shown me that I was totally incorrect in my assumptions. How did the Pinehurst neighborhood section of Leominster, which is, if you go up Merriam Avenue, and before, in the Kmart area, where the Peter Levanti Bridge, which is so controversial today because of the traffic and so on, none of that stuff was there. Where, that's the general vicinity that we're talking about. We'll get into details in a little bit, but how did the Pinehurst neighborhood of Leominster get its name, please, Helen?
Well, I'm not sure, but I think it's because from Lindell Avenue to the Fitchburg-Leominster line, and probably beyond that a little bit, were a lot of pine trees there. And if you look at the lake, Roach's Lake, there were pine trees all around the edge of that too.
That too, but there's... And
then on Mr. Ewing's property, there was a lot of pine trees up there.
So there were a lot of pines, but there was a pub.
Right, and that
tell
was
us about
called,
that.
But if you go just over the Fitchburg line, a little to the right up there, just before you get to Winooski Road, there was a Pinehurst Cafe.
And it later became the
Partners Pub.
Partners Pub.
Right.
So a lot of people can locate in their mind's eye where that area is.
Right.
Where that neighborhood was. I had to. It's difficult for me in a way to think of the area because I grew up, and there's now we have the Kmart Plaza there, the Twin City Plaza, and Route 2 is there. But as we're going to see in a little bit, it was entirely different.
It was.
When you were a girl. We know where you spent your childhood, although you came there when you were 4 years old?
4 years old.
4 years old from?
From Rhode Island.
From Rhode Island. And then from 4 years old on until you got married and moved out of that area.
Right.
That's the area, that was your neighborhood. When were you a child? You were born in 1916.
16.
And you were a very young 88. You're doing very, very well. God bless you. Wonderful memory. You grew up in what period of Leominster's history and the nation's history?
Well, during the 20s, and then in the 30s during the Depression, and then in the 40s during World War II.
World War II.
I was still, I moved away from there when I got married, but then I moved back into the neighborhood for a while too, and I was living there during World War II.
During the World War II era. It wasn't as many of, as I'm finding out through these neighborhood snapshot interviews, people didn't get out of their neighborhood very much in those days. What was the reason for that?
Transportation, I think. Because very few people up there had a car. and we had to depend on the trolley if you had the money, you know. And one item that I think is interesting, we were right near the Fitchburg and Leominster line, and if you were going to Fitchburg, you would walk over the line.
Over the town line?
To get in on the bus because it was cheaper.
Oh.
But if you're going to Leominster, you'd stay on the Leominster side.
So the Pinehurst neighborhood figured that one out. And,
right. And it was only a matter of, wasn't even a half a block, just a few feet, and it would be cheaper.
There was a price difference. Do you remember what the cost to ride on the trolley was by any chance? I know it's, we hadn't talked about that.
No. It seems to me it was a dime, but I could be wrong.
And these were the track, these were actual
trolley
tracks. And then you said later on, the tracked trolleys were replaced by
a
bus with regular rubber wheels.
Regular bus with a trolley.
With electric powered, with a line.
Right.
And then that evolved into
just the regular bus.
Regular buses. So it went from the track trolleys to the trackless trolleys to bus transportation.
Yeah.
Regular buses that we think of as buses today. And then as time went on, we still have bus service today, but now people have cars.
Everybody has a car today. Sometimes more than one.
More than one. But in those days, for a family to have a car was fairly unusual.
Very unusual. My father never had a car. It was a big deal when my brother bought a car. Model A Roadster.
Model A Ford Roadster.
With a rumble seat.
A rumble seat. I remember as a kid riding in, one of our neighbors had an old Ford. That would be a treat to ride in a rumble seat. Today, for the viewing audience, if in their mind's eye, if they can picture that area of town, there's Merriam Avenue, and then there's Lindell crosses. And then you head up towards, on the way to Fitchburg, towards Winoosknock Road. There's the bridge, there's Route 2, there's Kmart. That's the way it looks today. The Roach's Pond, Pierce's Pond is still on the left.
Right.
But then what did it look like when you were a child, when you were a girl?
Well, the house I grew up in, of course, was taken for Route 2.
There was no, there was no Route 2.
There was no Route 2, and it was all woods.
There was no bridge.
There was no bridge, no. And the houses up on the corner of Lindell Avenue, there were no houses there. That was all fenced off, so that the horses from Roach's riding stable could graze up there. That was a big field.
Big field. Lots of woods.
Not around the lake so much.
Around, but
because he had a horse track around the lake.
Now we're talking about Mr.
Roach.
Mr. Roach, after whom Roach's Pond
is called.
It's called, but it was also known as Pierce's Pond. Right?
Yeah, well, Mr. Pierce owned it first.
Mr. Pierce. And that just leads us into, this is a plug for a wonderful book, and we'll do a different book plug at the end. This is Images of Leominster. This is a book written by Thomas Tucker Hazard and Diane Sanabria. Introduction by Robert Cormier, Images of Leominster, and it's for people in our viewing audience, if you haven't seen this book or haven't purchased it, it's a wonderful book. It's put out by, as I said, Thomas K. Hazard and Diane M. Sanabria for the Leominster Historical Society, and it's loaded. It's primarily a picture of old photographs of Leominster and the captions under the photographs. It's a trip back in Leominster's history, a wonderful book. And the connection that Helen is talking about, Pierce's Pond, can't show it on camera because it's too small, but very interesting little anecdote. Harry K. Pierce created the man-made Pierce's Pond as a backdrop for his riding path and large stable. In this aerial view in the book, you can see Lindell Avenue on your right. At the time, it ended at Merriam Avenue. Grayling Hall, which was a beautiful mansion, is out of sight, is out of view on the right. Pierce's estate was a showplace. If it were built today, it would cost $3 million at least. He built an attached glass building for his southern-born wife's palm court, so she could enjoy her palm trees through the New England winters. When he sold the mansion to Mr. Ewing, whom you knew, Mr. Ewing was known as the Tapioca King. Apparently he made his fortune in tapioca. Mr. Ewing filled the mansion with priceless works of art from all over Europe. Today, the Julie Country Day School utilizes the garage and small stable building. At the time of the publication of the book, Grayling Hall was in disrepair. It has since been razed. It has since been torn down, and it has been demolished. And then it talks about Grayling Hall itself, the building which was demolished. Grayling Hall, located at the corner of Merriam and Lindell Avenues. There's a little, I think, land trust park there now on the Doyle estate. Has a wonderful history. The land was originally purchased by Timothy Kendall. This goes way back. His house was moved down Lindell Avenue on logs when Joel Crosby, once General Washington's bodyguard, purchased the property in the 1790s and built a large federal house there. In 1905, the industrialist Harry Pierce built Grayling Hall, the mansion. The next owner was Mr. Ewing, known as the Tapioca King, who sold the estate to the Sisters of Notre Dame when his wife died. Fascinating book, well worth the purchase price put out by the Leominster Historical Society.
The Tapioca King, the factory was in Orange.
Was in Orange, Mass.
And he used to take, sometimes Mr. Ewing would take the trolley to Fitchburg to get on the train to go to Orange. And then sometimes he would have his chauffeur pick him up when he came back.
And did the chauffeur ever give you?
Yeah, he used to give us, the kids in the neighborhood, he would give us a ride in the limousine once in a while.
In the limo?
Yeah.
All right, the neighborhood kids. Mr. Ewing, this fabulous estate, but who owned the riding stable across the street?
Yeah, Mr. Roach owned that.
Mr. Roach owned that.
Yeah.
It was originally Mr. Pierce who had it built,
right.
I guess. Beautiful stables. Did you ever tell us about? You were telling me about your adventures down there.
Yeah, Mr. Roach would give us a ride sometimes in the sulky when he was out training the horses for that.
Now, was there a path all the way around the pond?
Almost.
Almost all the way around.
And then sometimes we would ride in his daughter's pony cart, and sometimes we would ride in the big wagon with the horse they called Jimmy. Old Jimmy would take stuff to the dump. We'd ride with that.
So it was a treat to go to the dump.
But that riding school today, I think, is that building is a warehouse.
Yes.
But he used to train horses there. It's a huge building. If you've ever been up there and looked at it.
I haven't been.
They used to play basketball on horseback in there. It's that big.
Wow. Basketball on horseback?
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
And did you ever see any of these?
Oh yeah, we used to go over and watch them. Yeah.
And they'd have the players, the men or the
somebody riding the horses.
Somebody riding the horses, and they'd actually shoot.
Yeah, yeah.
So it must have been a huge.
It's a huge place. And another interesting fact: the Leominster football team would practice their secret plays there before the Thanksgiving game. In
the big.
In the riding school, inside the building, so Fitchburg couldn't see what they were doing.
What a great. Wow. So so they'd actually, it was big enough to have football players and play
it's a huge building.
Basketball on horseback, and the team would actually practice for the Fitchburg game, hold the secret practices within that
inside the building.
Inside the building. Wow.
That's you know, when you think about it. You can go up there and look at the building today, but I don't think anybody would ever let you get in there because I don't know what they're storing there. I don't know who owns it.
You swam in Roach's Pond.
Right.
Now,
we learned to swim there. Learned to skate.
It wasn't public swimming.
No, no, it was
Only
private.
But why were you kids?
Well, we lived in the neighborhood, so we were allowed to go there.
And it was Mr. Ewing who would allow the...
No, Mr.
Mr.
Roach.
Roach. I
Mr.
keep
Roach.
on, because by that time, Mr. Ewing owned one side of the
Yeah,
street.
right.
And
Mr. Roach owned the other.
the other. Helen, you said that your neighborhood was really international. It was like the League of Nations.
Right.
Explain what you meant by that.
Well, of course, my folks were Finnish. We came from Finland. We had neighbors who were Swedish. There was an English family. There was a German family across the street. Then there was a couple, Mr. Taylor was French, and I think his housekeeper was English. And then we had Irish people further down the road. And I think Swanties, I believe, was Swedish. But we had a mixture of nationalities there.
It was a mixture of nationalities, and so reflective of the immigration that has
Right.
made our country great, really.
Right,
And it was like a melting pot.
right. True.
True melting pot. You mentioned something about your Finnish heritage that a little later your dad put up a sauna.
Yeah, we
Tell
had
us about that.
We
It
had a
was an
sauna
interesting.
In the backyard, up in the back.
It was
of the
all
house.
pretty much woods and.
It was. And he put a big lilac bush in front of it, so it wasn't that noticeable from the road. And then Saturdays, when he'd really get the fire going, and it was the old-fashioned kind where you heated the stones and everything, and you'd throw water on them to get steam. When the smoke would come out of the chimney, and people would ride by, and there was some official from Leominster noticed that, and he stopped a couple times because he thought we might have a still back there.
I thought you were bootlegging.
Yeah.
So this was during Prohibition.
Right. During the 20s.
During the 20s. All right, fascinating. And so,
You know.
and he satisfied himself that you
Right,
weren't.
right.
you
Oh, yeah,
weren't-
my father would have had him come right in and take a sauna if he'd wanted it.
You talked about growing up in the area, the woods. You had an orchard. Your kids could play in the woods, and we'll talk about Bobcat Mountain in a little bit. But you said that earlier in the ante room that you really ate very well in those days, even though it was the Depression. And you mentioned your very positive attitude is you and your family survived the Depression. You survived World War II. Tell us something about that.
Yeah, well, I was born during World War I. And then we went through the Depression. And then after I got married, we went through World War II. And after that, there was a slight depression when things slowed down again after the war. But we always made it, and I don't like to hear people get depressed. I don't like that, because you can always make it if you make up your mind.
You certainly can. You have a very positive
You know.
attitude, and that's the secret. That's wonderful.
You have to think positive.
Absolutely. How true. How true. During that era, there weren't a lot of groceries. You pretty much grew your own.
Yeah, we had a huge garden, and we had several fruit trees. And there was a grocery from Fitchburg that used to come and take orders, and then he'd come back and deliver whatever especially like meat. We had our own chickens, though. So we had eggs and we had chickens, but...
Now, what's the Finnish connection to this grocery in Fitchburg? Was that the one where you said that the
United Co-op,
The United Co-op.
it was near there, but it was a small Finnish grocery.
and they would take orders and
They would take orders
actually
and,
deliver.
and then they deliver.
Would they deliver by the trolley? I'm wondering.
No, he had his own little wagon that he came with.
Had his wagon. As far as a neighborhood grocery store, there pretty much wasn't one. But
There wasn't one, and I think a lot of people, if they went downtown, they went to Brockleman's.
Brockleman's was the
big store.
Brockleman's.
And then I think in Leominster there was a Shays Market, wasn't there, across from the post office? On the corner there?
I don't know. You know better than I.
I think there was a Shays Market there too.
And I think later on, do you remember an A&P in?
Yes.
There was that also.
Then there was a First National.
First National. Right.
The A&P was, one of them was over by where Friendly's is now.
Okay.
Over in that area somewhere.
Okay. No supermarkets, though. They were.
No.
They were. This was the era, of course, before supermarkets are a relatively new thing after the 50s, probably. Yeah. 50s, 60s, and now they're supermarkets. Very, very interesting. Conveniences that we take for granted today. Television, we're being viewed by people in their living rooms. They're watching the LA TV over the cable, satellite, telephones, central heating, electricity, cell phones, the works. What about when you were a little girl?
Well, there wasn't any. You did your laundry by hand.
A wash tub with a scrub board.
Yeah.
The ripple board there, the scrub.
But I think my mother was the first one in the neighborhood to get a washing machine, because the neighbor had ordered one for his wife, and his wife wouldn't let them bring it in the house. So she sent them up to my mother and said maybe Mrs. Thompson would like it.
She didn't want a washing machine.
She wouldn't have it. So my mother thought about it, and she said sure, she'd take it, you know. So she paid for it $1 a week or something like that.
And this was the ringer type. What do you remember? It wasn't. Was it?
It was electric.
It was electric.
But the ringer was not electric.
The ringer
was you had to.
You had to crank it. I remember as a kid our washing machine.
It had a plunger in it.
Okay, I don't remember that. That was
3 plungers that went up and down.
Okay.
You know.
And that would ring. That would ring the.
And that would clean the clothes, and then you'd put them through the ringer.
Okay, because I remember as a kid, we had a ringer washer, and I know you were supposed to. You were supposed to be careful with it. You were supposed to not get your hand or anything caught in the ringer.
Right.
So you did have electricity, but when you first moved there,
we didn't have electricity.
You didn't have
electricity. The house
electricity.
wasn't wired at the time,
but
electricity was out there. So my father had the electricity put into the house right away, and that was great, you know, to have the lights come on.
And so prior to that, it was kerosene.
Yeah, we didn't have a radio.
No radio.
For a long time. We didn't have. We had a record player, a gramophone, if you want to call it.
Was that the crank?
Eventually, the crank
kind, the big
disc,
record.
Yeah,
big
and I
disc.
have a couple of those old ones.
The great big ones.
Souvenirs.
And you'd have to crank that. The telephone.
We didn't have a telephone until my oldest sister got a job with the telephone company.
And then you got a telephone.
Then we got a telephone.
And it was a private line?
No, it was a party line.
Party line.
And you talk about, I've forgotten what they call it today, but it was nothing more than a party line. Everybody had
conference call?
Yeah, everybody had their own ring. And if it rang twice, you knew if it was the neighbors, and you knew which neighbor it was. And if you wanted to listen in or if you wanted to talk to them, you'd pick up the phone too. So we'd talk 3 or 4 at a time.
And that was, so you had the conference call well before.
Especially the young people, because say, are you going swimming today, or are you going to do this today, you know?
And I'll bet sometimes the conference call, people participated in the conference who weren't supposed to. Probably they would, some people listen in. And, yeah. And then like it's sort of like when you're at the supermarket and you're in the line, it always seems that when you're ready to go to check out, that's the longest line. Well, I'll bet it just seems that way, but I'll bet that sometimes on those, when you wanted to make a phone call, the line was always busy.
Right, that's true. You had to wait your turn.
It just seemed that way. The school, where did you go to school?
We went to George Street School.
Which is no longer there. It's,
Right, that's been torn down. And we had to take the bus, but there were no school buses, so we were given special tickets to get on the regular bus. We had to go on the bus schedule. There was no special schedule
the
for us
regular
either.
public transportation schedule.
So we would get to school.
That's when you went to George Street?
George Street.
And was it it was a regular bus, or was it the trolley bus?
Well, whatever was going at the time.
Whatever was going at the time.
Yeah.
And so there were no public school buses as such, as you said. You'd get special tickets. When you went to Gallagher
Junior High.
When we went to junior high, you had to abide by not the school schedule, but the public transportation schedule. Tell us about that.
Yes, and then we'd get downtown about 7 o'clock in the morning, and school wasn't open, and we'd go to the police station and wait.
You had to wait.
We had to wait,
at the
and we
police
weren't
station.
allowed to run the street.
You had to wait at the police station.
We had to wait at the police station, and that's the old police station.
Which is
gone.
Which is gone. It's between the Baptist church and the Unitarian church.
Right.
It's that lot
Right.
that's there. That was the old the old
Right.
town hall, the old police station.
That's where we waited.
And was that the old town hall at one time too?
I don't remember because
I think it may have been. It had a beautiful bell. The bell, which was on the old police station, is now the memorial bell in the Common in Monument Square.
Right.
At the Soldiers' Monument. What are some of your other memories of school?
Well, when we went to George Street, we had, like for Memorial Day, we would march from George Street down to the City Hall for memorial services. The whole school.
All the kids.
We'd have to walk down.
With flags?
Yeah, with a little something that we all carried. Then we had, at times, what they call field day. And we would go up to the old high school on West Street.
Right, the old Carter, the former Leominster High.
And every school
Carter.
would be there, and we would do all kinds of exercises and folk dances and just celebrate, have a good time
Field day.
together, you know.
That would be all the schools in Leominster.
Yeah.
And that was that on the field that's behind
Yeah,
the big,
yeah.
what used to be during my era, I went to, that was my high school.
Yeah.
And that was the practice field, the athletic field.
Yeah.
That's still there. There's a little children's playground there now. And
Yeah, well, we saw, before they had Doyle Field, that's where we saw the football games.
that was, so before Doyle Field, that's where the
Football games were.
Leominster High football games used to be there before Doyle Field. That's going way, way back.
Yeah,
Wow.
you know.
But during the field day, was it near the end of the school year, perhaps?
Yeah, it had to be in the warm weather.
The warm weather, and
Yeah.
then the student bodies and faculty from various schools in Leominster would centralize there, and they'd have a great time.
Yeah.
It sounds...
And May Day, they always celebrated May Day down to City Hall. I remember going down there and winding the maypole many times.
the ceremony of the maypole.
Yeah, and then they do, those that took ballet lessons, they had their dancing, and we did the maypole, and everybody did their thing down there.
Do you remember any big parades in Leominster, any events like that? They seem to have lots of parades and citywide celebrations in those
Well,
days.
the only parade I really remember is the parade they had after World War II.
That was a big one.
That was, you know. We didn't get downtown that often.
Again, because of the transportation.
And my parents weren't, my mother didn't speak, she spoke English, but not that great. She was self-conscious about it. My father was okay because he worked. He was a carpenter, and he worked out with other contractors and everything. But they never, like my mother never went to school for PTA or anything like that.
Because she felt self-conscious because of the language Finnish, which is so common, and it was so common with all various nationality groups that came in. And I guess it's, as the generations, now look at you, you're fluent in English and able to converse, and the new people coming into our country today, it's very hopeful because the children will, the kids know how to, the kids do learn how to speak English, and it's wonderful to have a second language too.
You know, yeah.
Do you have a second language?
Well, I did.
You did, but then you
I've kind of forgotten it now that my parents are dead. I don't have any use to any chance to speak it anymore. You know, I do have Finnish friends though,
and
you know, but they talk English too.
So that's again our wonderful nation and the positive attitude, a melting pot. That's the good model to have.
Right.
You know, there's the Mosaic model too, which is another model of how our country is. But you know, one out of many is a wonderful goal to aim for. One nation out of many.
Yeah.
The entertainment. What did you kids? I know you swam at Roach's Pond, and you rode. You had the sulky rides, or the rides.
We spent a lot of time over there.
What about all the woods? Did you go hiking? Did you?
We went skiing, and we went up Bobcat Mountain. We used to hike a lot. You know, we went up Bobcat Mountain, which is Manusnak Mountain. I think if you walk over the top of that, you come into No Town, and then we'd come back down.
Walk over Manusnak Hill,
yeah,
and you're in the No Town
area there. And up by the No Town Reservoir. Then we'd walk back down on the pipe that brings the water down.
Now, we know the No Town Reservoir. It's one of the main. This filtration plant. It's part of the Leominster Water Department. It's one of our very important water resources. But you're saying there was, and I have actually been hiking up along that section, and there are still sections of this big wrought iron water pipe. So I know where you're talking about. But when you were a girl, that was the main pipe probably that took the water from the No Town and fed it into further down the line, and it was not rusted then. It was a good big pipe, yeah. And it was large enough so that
you could walk on it.
You could walk on it. And once in a while it'd spring a leak, and what did you say?
We'd step on the leak so we could get by it.
But a huge pipe.
It was a huge pipe.
And that was actually, for kids, it was a pathway walking along the pipe. I think my uncle had mentioned something about that too. So a lot of hiking, skiing. Where did you ski?
Well, we skied around. There was a small hill from Lindell Avenue that led into the lake, and we used to ski from there. But we used to go cross country.
Cross country skiing.
Yeah, my whole family skied. My father made our skis.
Your father made, and that was the Finnish heritage.
Yeah,
because
he made the skis. And in those days, the skis had to be very long. Nowadays, they don't make them. They found that it's better not to be that long. You can handle them better.
I remember, again, my uncle had in the barn an old pair. He grew up in. He's 93 now. I think he's turned 93. He's living down in Florida. And in the barn there was this old pair of huge wooden skis. They were long. And I tried, one of my few forays into skiing was trying to ski down, I guess, my grandparents' hill on Marguerite Avenue, Petronelli. And maybe that's why I didn't take up skiing. Other reason, you know. But the huge skis. So you skied?
We skied and we walked. We walked everywhere. A lot of times we wouldn't even take the bus to go downtown. We'd walk. Walk
from that area,
from Kmart downtown. We were like halfway between Leominster and Fitchburg.
So it was.
That's right. Either way, it's about 2.5 miles.
And actually, picturing it today, if you can picture Kmart, you weren't far from the car barn section.
Right, we could go in the back over there, and then of course there was a trolley that went down Water Street.
Right, and there was no Kmart, so you walked through the woods or the fields
Right.
or wherever it was to the car barn section. All woods,
All
fields,
woods over there.
Woods. No Kmart.
No, and talking about winter sports, we used to slide down the hill where the Leominster Hospital is
Where the Leominster Hospital is.
now. We used to slide down the
Slide
hill.
down that hill. There was no no Leominster Hospital
No,
there.
I remember when that was built, the first one,
Wow.
you know, Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Doyle, Bernard
Yeah.
Doyle, wonderful
Donated the land and
benefactor,
everything, yeah.
and his daughter, Louise Doyle, is still a wonderful
I know her,
benefactor
yeah.
of Leominster. Well, you lived up in I'm thinking proximity, the Doyle estate.
And Janet Dillon. Janet Dillon in Shadow Lawn. Well, I guess a Shadow Lawn Farm.
Shadow Lawn Farm was up in that area too.
Right.
So that was the Doyle estate there? Was the building there? The
Oh,
building.
yeah, the big house was there.
The big house was there.
Yeah,
And now, what did you say? Now, Shadow Lawn and
that was Dillon's.
Dillon's. That was another family.
Yeah,
The
that's
Dillon
on Lindell Avenue.
Dillon family, and it was a big farm.
Yeah, he had a farm.
And was it connected in any way to the Doyle estate, or was it
No,
a separate?
it's separate. It's on. It would be on the other side of. Well, actually, it was like across the street from Ewing's Castle on Lindell Avenue.
And Ewing's Castle was Grayling Hall, which
Yeah.
was right on the corner there
Yeah.
of Lindell and Merriam.
Dillon's farm was on the other corner.
On the other corner, and there are many houses there now.
Well, it wasn't. That was all garden right there.
All gardens. How different it was
And
then.
from Merriam Avenue to Maple Avenue, you know, as you go down Lindell Avenue, you turn into Maple,
I'm trying to picture.
you know, from the corner of
Lindell,
Lindell
the
Avenue and Merriam,
intersection.
there's a corner there. If you go down Lindell Avenue and take a left right there, you turn into Maple Avenue. That first street is Maple Avenue.
Maple Avenue.
That little section right there was all cornfield.
So,
Mr. Dillon had corn for his cows there.
and there were dairy cows, there were cows and farm animals, and
Yeah, but he didn't have them out that much.
did you ever have any as a kid? Some of the folks have said. I remember Dick Bergman had mentioned how they used to herd the cows, or they would cut through and there'd be cows and so on. Did you ever have any experiences with shooing the cows back or anything like that?
The only cow we had trouble with, Mr. Roach had a cow. One cow for the family. And that was the only cow we had trouble with. It would chase us. I mean, it was not a friendly cow.
Probably gave sour milk.
Once in a while it would get out. If the gate was left open and get out in the neighborhood, then we had to chase it to get it back in.
Back in. So all these childhood memories were
You know.
very fond memories. It sounds like it was great fun.
You know.
Do you remember, now one of the things that I do want to, because I have in my mind how it is now in that area, and the bridge, the Levanti Bridge, Peter Levanti Bridge, which is under construction, and you have to wait in line, one side, so on. And it's on its way to being fixed, and that'll be a memory eventually of the inconvenience. Kmart, Route 2. I want you to let the LATV audience know, Helen, please, where was your house in relation to that bridge? You told me, and this
It's right in the middle of Route 2.
Right in the middle of Route 2.
Just before you get to the bridge.
And there was no
There was no bridge there.
No bridge.
No.
No Kmart.
No.
No Route 2.
Nothing. Just
Nothing.
woods.
Woods. And then even the trolley line went by your house and then made
It went around by the Castle Arms.
where the Castle Arms was, and then headed up to
Fitchburg.
Fitchburg. You say that after all these years, there's still something that you, when you do drive up Route, when you do drive by that area, not on Route 2, but on
Merriam Avenue.
On Merriam Avenue, you do, when you drive by there, you do fondly look
I
for
look,
something.
there's a tree that my swing was on. There was a huge oak tree there, and that's where my swing was. And it was still
as a
there.
child, and,
Yeah.
and that swing is still, so it
The
must
tree
be,
is still there. You
is
can't
it just
see,
before the bridge? Is it on the left? If we were going towards Kmart, is it on the left or the right? Because next time I'm stuck in
No,
traffic there, I want to look.
it's on the right, but it's really on the Route 2 side there,
Okay.
just inside the fence. But right now you can't see it because of the leaves.
All the leaves, but in the fall.
In the fall, in the winter you can see it,
and the remains of the
and it's
swing
still-
still there.
but it's crumbling.
Yeah.
You know? That was quite a, I spent a lot of time on that swing. My father made a hammock, for, well, like a glider almost. He had it on ropes.
He sounds like he was a very, very
You know.
ingenious,
Yeah, he was pretty clever
clever man.
with his hands. You know, he took little scraps of wood and made things out of them, like I make things out of scraps of cloth.
Yes, you were saying one of you're still very, very, as we near the conclusion of the interview, you're still very, very active. You're still with your positive attitude. What are some of your hobbies?
Well, crafts and sewing. I've sewed all my life, but right now it's quilting.
You're a quilter.
Yeah.
And
I'm very curious, though, you know. I saw an article in the Sunday paper not too long ago about Finland. It was a very good article. And that got me thinking about Finland now, so I'm looking for a book on the history of Finland, so I'll learn more about that, you know.
So you'll learn more about the history of Finland. Well, maybe in my trips to the left, maybe I can come up with something for you.
So that's always, you know, I've always got something in the back of my mind to do.
And you are involved in another book. This is The Images of America in Leominster by the Leominster Historical Society. Wonderful book. But another book of Leominster is in the works, Combing Through Leominster.
Right.
And there's a book committee headed by Mr. David Chester.
Yeah.
And he has a committee and a number of members, and you've gotten, tell us how you got involved in that. And the book is in the works, it's in progress, a lot of work, tremendous amount of work. And how did you get involved in
Well, I watched
that?
your show about the neighborhoods, and I realized nobody was talking about my neighborhood. So I went out and I got in touch with the Historical Commission and told them
that there was another neighborhood that wasn't being highlighted.
There was somebody there that they missed, you know.
Yes, and that's how I heard about you.
Right, yeah.
And they said there's this woman who has, you know, there's this other neighborhood, and I'm glad that they told me about you because it's fascinating. And you contributed some information about your family, and then you got into actually going to the meetings.
Right, right. Now, there was one thing that happened during the 20s, because I remember I was in grade school when this happened. There was a drought, and Leominster was really hard-pressed for water. They were even draining the water from the local ponds. And when it was in the winter, they drained the water from, they were taking the water from Roach's Pond, and the ice sank.
Which,
you know?
Yes.
The ice sank. The sides were like this, and then the bottom was flat. And that's, we went skating anyway.
So I can picture the ice with all the, because the ice floating on top of
And we had to
water.
boil our water and take small bottles of water to school with us.
Ah. So here's another thing, bottled water today. And
Yeah. I remember, I can just see the ice the way it was. And we went.
If you, now that I've gotten into a lot of Leominster history, and I look at some of the old photographs and read some of the old newspaper articles about Leominster history, there were, through the years, there were many floods.
Yeah, there have been a few.
There have been floods in Leominster, and every town, I'm sure, in the region. It isn't just local to Leominster, but there have been floods. There have been drought periods. I lived through a couple of droughts. I was, in fact, I actually walked a couple of times at Fall Brook Reservoir in the drought in the 60s. And subsequent to that, when I actually walked across Fall, the water was out and there were mud spots, but I was able to make it. No water pretty much in the reservoir, a couple of maybe, even if they were all dried up, some muddy spots, but you could actually walk across the base of Fall Brook Reservoir, and I recall seeing some of the trees that were cut when Fall Brook Reservoir was made, and the stumps, which had been underwater all those years, were in almost pristine condition. They hadn't rotted yet. It was amazing. And actually seeing one spot where some of the reservoir workers had left some bricks, pile of bricks, and that was built in, prior to 1900. So it's amazing stuff. But Leominster has suffered floods and many fires, but we've made it through all those times.
And the hurricane of 38.
The hurricane of 38. Tell us about that.
Yeah.
That's something that must be...
I was working at the time and at Foster Grant's, where the Water Tower Plaza is now. And they let us out of work early. And so about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was going over to my mother's in North Leominster. We were supposed to go there for supper. So I walked past Doyle Field, and the goalposts were flying over my head. And we got over there, and her chimney came down. But that's the only damage they had there. And then my husband was coming down from Fitchburg, and they got as far as the Carbon. And that was a trolley bus, because the bus couldn't go any further. And he stopped at the Carbon. He told the people they had to get off the bus and walk the rest of the way.
Because with trees being down and the power being...
Yeah, and the power was out. So he had to... So my husband, very smart, he walked down the railroad track, because he figured there were no trees. There wasn't that much...
That's right. That would have been cleared pretty much...
The only problem he had was the sand blowing against him.
During the...
But he got home. But I mean, the next morning, everybody was out. Trees were down everywhere. You couldn't walk up any street without climbing over a tree.
There was a lot of devastation, yes.
We just were not prepared for that.
Yes, and it was in the days before, now we have forewarning of it, and television satellites and everything. It was a surprise to the region. It really was.
And then I came from Westerly, Rhode Island, and the beaches down there, I lost a couple of cousins who were on the beach at the time. One worked at Watch Hill.
I remember seeing a photograph of, it may very well have been Westerly, an old photograph of before. They showed a before and after, how the houses along the beach before, a photograph taken before and then after, they were gone. It was
yeah, that was, and I know I have one cousin that went out to help them look for bodies, and he said they'd find a car buried practically with somebody in it,
It was a disaster to all of New England.
Yeah. When you see those pictures, you see them over again, and you.
And today, recently, within the last week, Florida has had a devastating hurricane. So we get them. They get them frequently down there. We get them up here.
Right.
But not with the great frequency, and it's when they come inland. That one came inland, and its path was tremendous devastation.
Yeah.
And that is so many of the people whom I have interviewed have that's something that we bring up, and that's unforgettable if you lived through it.
And now we always get so much warning. We know. Yes. We can prepare for it.
Yes, and so generally the fatalities are fewer. But that was a huge one in all of New England.
Yeah, I think we're better prepared in New England, not only for that, but for earthquakes. I think we're ready for anything.
Yes, we're New Englanders.
Yeah, right.
And which sort of, to conclude our interview, just before we do, that connects to your positive attitude, your surviving, you and your family surviving through the Depression and the war years and all of that. It's attitude is so important, having a positive attitude. And Helen, you have that wonderful positive attitude.
You have to you just pick yourself up and keep on going.
Absolutely,
you know.
Absolutely, wonderful attitude. Is there anything else you would like to share with the LATV audience? Viewing audience before we conclude this interview, and History's Leominster or anything else?
No, the only thing is I grew up in Leominster. I lived here most of my life, and I think people should appreciate what we have here, because I really think that the fire department, the police department, and the whole city is really special.
It really is.
It really
is.
When you think about it.
It really is. That's Helen. You're a wonderful lady. It's been a privilege and an honor to meet you.
Oh, well, thank you.
It really is. Thank you very much.
I'm happy that I thought about getting in touch with you or someone for a long time, and I'm glad that I did.
Well, I am also.
You know.
It's wonderful. I would like to conclude this interview. I would like to extend my thanks to Mrs. Helen Beliveau, Mr. Kyle Pimerini, Mr. Jack Selly, Mr. Kevin Moran, all the folks at the LATV studios for making this, what I think was a very interesting and enjoyable interview possible, and especially you, Helen. Thank you very much again, and as always, the LATV viewing audience. Thank you very much.